Hello, my name is Jared French, and my research was on an examination of 18th century Baptist religious liberty pamphlets. And I did it in the form of a religious test. And so with any test, you have to have a standard. And so the 18th century Baptists have a built-in standard with their neighbors of the Congregationalists. Right? Many Baptists, they would emerge from congregational homes. Their audience for their pamphlets, appealing for religious liberty for all, was to congregational New England. But those are two very broad things, Baptist and congregational. So I narrowed in to the glorifying God. Right? The Westminster Confession says that's the chief end of man. That was what Puritans and Congregationalists, standing on Puritan shoulders, defined life by, all life, government by. And so who would I then examine? Well, I can't examine all Baptists. So the representation comes from Isaac Backus, who was from 1724 to 1806, and then John Leland, 1754 to 1841. They're both Baptist ministers. They were historians and did much work throughout the colonies, and specifically New England. So those are my Baptist representatives. And again, each one of them, they provide so much details that we can still study today, get through their biographies, their histories, their writings. But I specifically focused on their religious liberty pamphlets, ones that were addressed to a New England audience, and how they handled or avoided the crucial theological motivation of glorifying God. And so Backus, I chose an appeal to the public in 1773, Government and Liberty Described, 1778, and then Leland, the right of conscience and inalienable, 1791, and the Yankee Spy in 1794. And so that brings me to the results. And I found that each pamphlet cast theological doubt on the religious legislation. It brings a shadow on how New England Congregationalism has been pursuing the glory of God through mandatory funding of churches, ministers, to maintaining society by restricting what religions were in in colonies, in the states. Right, and their concern was this was actually harming church and society, because now Christ's church is looking at man's legislation instead of looking at their faith commitments to Christ's laws. And so as historians, both men leave us with great histories, and they point to how man's integration of church and state have always ended poorly in this matter of harm both to the church and society. So they go back to Constantine, and not necessarily being a fan of Emperor Constantine. And so at the heart, this was a long-standing theological concern that really goes back to the foundations of the English Baptists to even the Reformation Protestant cause. For Baptists, always reforming, they doubt that government legislation can glorify God through force. Right? Hebrews 11:6 says you must have faith to please God. I mean, the Baptists would have a similar doubt, right? Bring alongside. They would have a similar doubt to how you can glorify God through infant baptism. Now, you may come from a different denomination that has that, but the Baptist theology finds its fullest expression when an individual has a pre-existent faith, has the new birth. Right? So this is a matter for the church, for Jesus' church to work out. And so each pamphlet points out how Jesus gave no instructions to government on helping him make disciples. And so government, man, you have your limits. And man has to recognize our limits if we're going to glorify God. And so Leland actually concludes the right and conscience enabled with an illustration from King David and the death of Uzziah in 2 Chronicles 6 and 1 Chronicles 13 through 15. That the glory of God wouldn't come to King David because David used man-centered methods. So I'm curious on how that hits you. See you on the discussion boards.